Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Texas Tech heading into 2024 just seems like one of those programs in the Big 12 that's just flying under the radar. You look at the national media and where the attention is going to teams like Utah, to teams like Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Dill, you make no mistake about it. If this Texas Tech team stays healthy in 2024, this could be one of the more dangerous teams in this conference. And you go back to the 2023 season, a quote-unquote disappointing season for Texas Tech. I mean, they were brutally banged up throughout the 2023 season, roller coaster at the quarterback spot. You kind of look up at this roster and say, Coach McGuire has done a phenomenal job recruiting the high school ranks. He's done a phenomenal job using the transfer portal. And as a result, this roster is checking a lot of boxes heading into 2024, fired up to kind of get into this roster, take a look at the schedule, and project this Texas Tech team heading into 2024. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Texas Tech fans. This is one of my favorite season previews to do every single year because we learn so much from you guys in the comment section. Every single year, you guys put us on to a guy that's kind of flying under the radar, breaks out in the 2024 season. I would love to hear from some of your breakout players, some guys that we might be sleeping on. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. A lot of fun Texas Tech game previews that we're going to be doing in the 2024 season. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I think you got to start at the quarterback position, which you go back to the 2023 season, say, all right, you won 7 football games. Kind of an impressive coaching job by Coach McGuire because it was a roller coaster at the quarterback spot. Obviously, Tyler Shuck going down with injury, then Baron Morton going down with injury. Baron Morton's your guy heading into 2024. Two things that really stand out. One, this kid is extremely talented. I remember talking about him when he committed to Texas Tech in the 2021 class, was one of the more coveted high school quarterbacks in the country. And then you look at the 2023 season, and say, it kind of started to find his rhythm. And I think it's really important. One was dealing with some injuries, but I think more importantly was not really the quarterback one heading into the 2023 year. Now it's his team. It's his offense. He's a little bit more comfortable in this Texas Tech offense. If Baron Morton stays healthy in 2024, there is zero doubt in my mind that he can be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12 that just seemingly nobody is talking about. And this Texas Tech team can win a lot of football games in the 2024 year.
Yeah, I think the big thing you just need to see more from Baron Morton is that ability to kind of operate that RPO game that I think Texas Tech's offense is essentially based off of. Because, again, I don't think you want to not feature Taj Brooks. I think he's still going to be the bell cow. I think he'll be the featured player in this offense. But Baron Morton, again, like you see that ability to push the ball down the field, make those big-time NFL throws. I think you just want to see him continue to get more comfortable operating that RPO system, getting the ball out of his hands quickly and keeping them kind of rolling along a little bit more. And then I think you combine that with his playmaking ability, you have a really, really dangerous offense.
Which is, it's going to get better. Like, you just have to assume that having a full offseason as that quarterback one, getting all the reps with the wide receiver one, he's going to have a little bit more command of this Texas Tech offense. And I think you're absolutely right. You look at how this Texas Tech offense is kind of predicated. It's about quarterbacks being quick decision makers, getting the football out on time accurately. That's only going to get better as Baron Morton has more experience within this Texas Tech offense. Now, I think you crushed it. Taj Brooks is the guy in this Texas Tech offense, one of the best running backs in the country. I quite frankly was surprised that he came back for another year. I know the Texas Tech fans aren't complaining about it. The number one thing I love about Taj Brooks, and being a Michigan fan myself, Dilly kind of reminds me of Blake Corum. Like, this kid just doesn't go down. You talk about running backs that not necessarily are always flashy, but just keep this team on schedule, turning 2nd and 8s into 2nd and 6s, 3rd and 5s into 3rd and 2s. His contact balance, his ability to make people miss, 96 missed tackles forced in 2023 is a ludicrous number. It's not always flashy with Taj Brooks, but he is the bell cow of this offense and a guy that, again, I don't even know if he gets enough credit for how important he was to this Texas Tech offense in that 2023 season.
You know what the crazy part is? Cameron Valdez, I think, is a really good a lot of teams. So I think they have really a good set of running backs. Cameron Valdez, maybe a bit more explosive in terms of what he can do in the open field, in terms of what he does catching the ball out of the backfield. But again, it's going to be the Taj Brooks show again. I think when you're the type running back where what you said, you just don't have negative plays, you're on schedule constantly, I think that'll allow Baron Morton to take some shots down the field, use some of those big physical wide receivers they have, and be able to try to manufacture some big plays and be more explosive than they were last.
The wide receiver position is fascinating. I think you bring in Josh Kelly, who was one of my favorite wide receivers in the transfer portal this cycle. I think he's probably going to be the wide receiver one. You're bringing Caleb Douglas, who is extremely talented, just hasn't really gotten the opportunity coming from Florida. Delcoy Eakin. This is a guy that the Texas Tech fans, when we did our top 10 players, they were banging the table for. I added him to the notebook, fired up to see what he can do.
He's such a smooth mover for that size. To be 6'2" and be able to run routes the way he does, getting in and out of his breaks, and then still be able to make those physical catches at the catch point, I should say. I think he's a really, really complete wide receiver. I'm kind of with you. I think he's going to be the one to look for. I know people like to go to the transfers inherently. That's almost like, as college football, the portal becomes what it is. People always looking for that new thing. But Coy Eakin, I still fully expect to be their number one guy.
And then you throw in true freshman Micah Hudson, who was, again, one of my favorite wide receivers in the 2024 class. You talk about Texas Tech starting to maximize what they can do on the recruiting trail. Dre McCray, one of the more just electric football players you see in the country in terms of the speed and what he brings. I kind of like what this Texas Tech team has in the pass catcher.
Getting him back is huge because, like, you saw him torching Oregon early in that season, and just his ability to work the middle of the field, be big, physical, really, really tough matchup at that size and the way he moves. I mean, you have a really, really complete, I think, offensive skill position. I think that the obvious question becomes, what is this offensive line going to be, and can they kind of allow these skill guys to make it happen?
I'll cook on the offensive line for a second. This was one of my talking points. It's so experienced. And we talked about this with top 10 players. You take a look at what they have. It is a ton of guys who are going into their fourth or fifth years of college football, kind of combination of guys returning, but also guys coming in through the transfer portal. I mean, you look at Caleb Rogers, has played over 3,300 snaps. Vinny Scurry coming from Toledo, one of the better guards in the country, has played over 2,200 snaps. Davion Carter coming from Memphis, 1,700 snaps. I don't know if this Texas Tech offensive line is going to be a top 10 unit in the country because I don't know if they have those bona fide All-American caliber dudes. That being said, this Texas Tech offensive line is incredibly experienced, and it kind of just makes me feel good about the floor of what this unit can be.
It does have to gel, though. That's always, I think, the question. Yes. Right. They have a lot of guys who have played a lot, but really Caleb Rogers is the only guy coming back who's really operated in that system a whole lot. So, again, I think you like the fact that you added all those veterans. You have a lot of experience, but at the end of the day, it still does have to gel, and I think that's kind of what everyone's looking for this Texas Tech team, especially on the offensive side.
What I would argue is you feel better about it gelling because so many of these guys have played so much football. Yeah. Like, you have a little bit more questions if it was, all right, a lot of talented young offensive linemen that haven't played a ton of football before. Then you have a bigger question of whether this team can gel on the offensive line because of all the experience that's coming into the portal. You feel a little bit better about the offensive line gelling in the 2024 year. Now, on the defensive side of football, this is probably the big storyline. Again, if Baron Morton stays healthy, if they just stay healthy on the offense, this is going to be a dangerous offense in the Big 12. It's going to put up a lot of points. How good can this defense be? I think that's the biggest question mark in terms of, can this Texas Tech team be a bona fide Big 12 championship contender? What I'm looking for is in the front seven. I think the secondary, I kind of like heading into 2024.
When you have that guy in Braylon Lux in the secondary,
he's a dog.
Or you really can trust. I think that makes it easier. And they got some things to fill in terms of what they need to add. But I do think they have that guy in Braylon Lux, a true number one corner who, again, when you have that, I think you can fill the other parts around a little bit more easily.
Yeah, and I feel pretty solid about CJ Baskerville. I feel very solid about Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez at the linebacker spot. My question is, how good can this team be against the run and getting after the passer, which has a lot to do with the defensive line. You go back to last year, only sacked the quarterback 5.4% of the time. That was 90th in the country. Gave up 4.4 yards per carry. That was 77th in the country. you're going to have a lot of rushing attacks that are prolific in the Big 12. You have to be able to stop the run and then get after the passer on those third and longs. That's kind of the question mark. Now, one thing I'd point out is Coach McGuire got aggressive in the transfer portal, didn't get that aggressive in the front seven, which I think tells me that, hey, even though we haven't heard of a ton of these guys or not a ton of these guys have played a ton of football, you feel pretty good that Coach McGuire was sitting there and saying, hey, we don't need to go to the transfer portal and add multiple guys to our front seven. We feel pretty good about what we have. So
I actually, the edge spot, I feel really pretty comfortable about. There's a lot of talented guys. That's what I'll say. I mean, Dylan Spencer, a young guy you got to see a little bit last year. Interesting looking guy, 6'5", lean, athletic. Joseph Adire, I think, is really, really good. And Harvey Dyson played awesome in that bowl game. So you do have some pieces in that edge room. I think, to me, the one big question I kind of have is the depth up through the middle. That's kind of obviously got to replace a lot of really good players like Hutchings and company. But I do think, obviously, Banks and Letta have played a lot. I think if their interior holds up and is deep enough and they can roll it, I think, again, you kind of look really, really good at the linebacker spot, including Bryce Ramirez. I think the edge play can be really, really good with some of the talent in that room. To me, I think if that interior holds up and they're solid there, I think this defense can be very good.
Yeah, and that's the question, because you look at a lot of these Big 12 teams that are going to run with pace and they're going to run the football a lot. You have to be deep on the inside of the defensive line because you're going to be rotating a lot of those big bodies. That's, again, my probably biggest question mark is how good can this defensive line be? And can they be a little bit more of game wreckers in the 2024 season? Now, you look at the schedule. This schedule's fascinating. Like, this team can get hot. You know what I mean? Last year it was a tough early schedule. They obviously dropped a few games that they shouldn't have dropped. You look at this year, Dill, their first 5 games, 4 of them are at home in Lubbock. And you feel pretty good about them winning their first 5, right? Albany and Christian should be a win. You go on the road to Washington State, a team that we have a ton of question marks about in the 2024 season. North Texas at home, you should be 3-0. Arizona State at home, should be 4-0. Cincinnati at home, you should be 5-0. My expectation for this Texas Tech team, if they are as good as I think they can be, they're going to be 5-0, getting ready to go on the road to one of the bigger contenders in the Big 12 of Arizona. I think both teams will be top 25 teams in the country. That's the game that I have circled on the schedule in the first 6 games.
Man, there's parts of what Texas Tech might want to do that might help out a little bit in terms of them being able to run the football. If they can kind of be that team against Arizona, that's probably where you're worried about as Arizona. Lost a lot of guys in that interior defensive line. Wasn't particularly great last year. So, again, they do have Fafita and T-Mac, and that's a handful to stop, and it will be a handful to stop. But, again, if Texas Tech can get them on the ground, beat them up a little bit, keep the ball out of that offense's hand, they do have that kind of avenue to win that game.
That I 100%. And I look at Arizona, and you kind of said it best. Like Noah Fafita and T-Mac, that might be one of the better quarterback wide receiver batteries that we see in the country. Outside of that, they lost a lot with Jedd Fisch leaving. Like, there's a lot of question marks about the rest of this football team after T-Mac and Noah Fafita. I think that's certainly a winnable game, especially if you get a Texas Tech team that starts 5-0, that just won 5 football games going on the road to Arizona. Certainly, I don't even know if you call it an upset, because I don't really know what the line's going to be on that one. Texas Tech certainly can win that football game. Then you're off. You get Baylor at home. I think that should be a win. I know you're a little bit higher on Baylor than I am. On the road at TCU, certainly a winnable game. On the road at Iowa State, I think that team will be tricky in the Big 12. Colorado at home. Again, I look at these games and say Texas Tech has a really good chance at winning a lot of these football games, and then you get another bye. You finish your schedule off on the road at Oklahoma State, Boone Pickens Stadium, tough place to play, certainly another game that you circle, and then West Virginia. And so you look at the schedule in the Big 12 and say, you don't play Kansas, you don't play Kansas State, you don't play Utah. You're playing a lot of teams that are probably at the bottom of the Big 12, teams like Baylor. I look at this Texas Tech team and say, it can be awfully dangerous in the Big 12. If they stay healthy, they get hot early. Watch out for the Texas Tech Red Raiders in the 2024 season. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.